Ask any long-haul driver about California's Grapevine, and you'll see a knowing look before they even answer. They all know the hill, the 11-mile drop that falls more than 2,600 feet between the Tejon Pass and the edge of the San Joaquin Valley floor. For truckers, it isn't just another grade. It's the mountain that measures experience. The Grapevine has a reputation that stretches far beyond California. Every freight company, every dispatch office, and every driver who's crossed the West knows that stretch of Interstate 5 by name. The descent is long enough to build heat in the brakes and steep enough to test even the best-tuned engine retarder. Winds sweep down from the Tehachapi Mountains, and the temperature can swing 40 degrees in a single day. One minute it's clear, the next fog rolls in, thick as smoke. At full load, gravity does most of the work. That's why veterans call it the hill you respect, not one you conquer. Every generation of truckers has its own Grapevine stories. Near misses, brake fires, blown tires, white-knuckled fog. Some call it a rite of passage. Others just say it's one grade that never lets you relax. Today, we talk about one of Southern California's most dangerous passes, simply known as the Grapevine, as we go beyond the exit. The first road over the mountain. To understand why the Grapevine became one of the most challenging stretches of highway in America, we first have to understand where it came from. Before it was a highway, the Grapevine was simply a mountain pass, a steep, narrow route cutting through the Tehachapi Mountains, where California's southern and central regions meet. Spanish explorers and missionaries first used the corridor in the late 1700s and called it Cañada de las Uvas, or Canyon of the Grapes, for the wild Cimarron grapes that covered its slopes and canyon walls. That name stuck, and it devolved into our modern term, the Grapevine. The summit itself was known as Tejon Pass, named for the wild badgers, which are Tejon in Spanish, that early travelers spotted there. For more than a century, these twin names, the Grapevine referring to the canyon and Tejon referring to the summit, have defined one of California's most important gateways. Long before it was a stretch of Interstate 5, the Grapevine was a wagon road, a steep, twisting track that carried mail coaches, freight wagons, and travelers between the San Joaquin Valley and Los Angeles. The U.S. Army had already recognized its importance when they built Fort Tejon in 1854. Guarding the pass that connected California's farmland to its ports. By the early 1900s, the same corridor was becoming the state's most important freight link. When California began paving what became called the Ridge Route in 1915, it was an engineering gamble. The job meant carving 96 miles of road through the mountains that was never meant for machines. The soil was a mix of adobe mud and decomposed granite, material so unstable that it turned to grease when it rained and dust when it dried. Construction crews hauled in tons of crushed rock and gravel from nearby quarries just to build a roadbed that wouldn't sink under its own weight. The Ridge Route also had hundreds of sharp turns and switchbacks, some so tight the drivers had to swing wide and back up to make them. The most infamous was Dead Man's Curve, a narrow horseshoe turn cut into the adobe hillside, where the drop-off was hundreds of feet straight down. There were no guardrails, and every season brought another wreck. But in spite of its dangers, the Ridge Route changed everything. For the first time, freight could move year-round between the valley's fields and L.A. Still, it was a rough, twisty, and dangerous stretch of road that wasn't quite ready for what was going across the top of it. Larger and faster automobiles and trucks. And suddenly, a road that was less than 2 decades old found itself put to pasture. The Golden State Highway. By the 1930s, the Ridge Route had already earned its place in history and its retirement. The traffic it carried, especially toward the end, was never what its builders imagined. Technology had outrun it completely and were destroying it. The narrow mountain road had become a bottleneck. California's answer? A new alignment. A modern 2-lane highway cut into the canyon floor, U.S. Route 99, often referred to as the Golden State Highway. For the trucking industry, it came at a perfect time. Freight had begun to move by road instead of rail, and the Grapevine was becoming a much busier corridor, bringing the Central Valley's produce to the markets in L.A. and abroad. Drivers who'd once fought their way over the Ridge Route now found the new road wider and straighter, and a little less dangerous. However, the early versions of US 99 were just 2 lanes wide, with a shared suicide lane as it became to be known, a middle passing lane. It was progress on paper, but chaos in practice. Head-on collisions were not uncommon. Another technology that had not kept up with the times? Brakes, especially on heavy trucks, making the northbound descent a nightmare. And at the bottom of that grade sat Grapevine Village, a small cluster of gas pumps, cafes, and repair shops that became every driver's halfway point. It was a welcome sight at the end of the downhill, but it also marked the most dangerous mile on the highway. In September 1949, a truck loaded with engine blocks lost its brakes on the descent and tore through the Union 76 station, setting off an explosion that leveled half the village and killed 2 people. In spite of all the destruction, the town rebuilt, and 5 years later, another runaway slammed into the rebuilt station and destroyed the post office this time. Crews reopened the route in days, a testament to how vital this portion of the highway was. By the end of the 1950s, traffic had outgrown the road once again. By this time, freight volume had tripled, and the Golden State Highway, once California's pride, was choking on its own success. The state's next solution would be bigger, faster, and designed to fix everything that had gone wrong before, and the Grapevine was about to enter the modern age. Not modern enough. When the interstate highway system reshaped America in the 1950s, US 99 through the Grapevine was busting at the seams. It was overloaded. Trucks, buses, and cars all shared 2 lanes, 4 lanes in some sections, but that crazy suicide lane was still there. The solution was to cut a straighter, wider highway through the same mountains. Construction on I-5 began in the early 1960s, and when it opened later that decade, it promised a safer and faster route. However, that mountain and its descent stayed the same, over 2,613 feet in just over 11 miles, most of it at a 6% grade, the longest sustained downhill on I-5. Even with engine retarders and better brakes, it still remains one of the most technically demanding stretches of a highway in California. A heavy load, long grade, and constant crosswinds can turn a simple descent into a serious test of skill. The California Highway Patrol runs a permanent commercial vehicle enforcement facility at Lebec. Officers check brakes, monitor speeds, and handle wrecks around the clock. In one 6-hour enforcement blitz, they issued more than 300 citations, including 200 for speeding. State law limits most multi-axle trucks to 55 miles per hour, but warning signs post 35 miles per hour in the steepest stretches. Runaway truck ramps line the hill, built to stop an 80,000-pound rig in seconds. Sensors at the summit measure brake temperatures and post warnings before the descent. Even so, the Grapevine sees its share of wrecks every year. Brake fires, blowouts, and chain reaction pileups when fog or dust cuts visibility. And for all the technology, planning, and enforcement poured into the pass, its toughest opponent has always been the same. You know her as Mother Nature. The living mountain. While formidable, the Grapevine's hardest challenges today don't come from its grade. They come from the air that moves through it. The pass sits in a unique spot where climates collide. The Mojave Desert to the east, the Central Valley to the north, and the cool Pacific air drawn inland from the south. That mix creates a corridor where wind, heat, and pressure change faster than anywhere on the interstate. When temperature swings, the mountain breathes. Afternoon winds funnel down the canyons like a chimney, lifting dust off the hillsides and cutting visibility to yards. In winter, those same air masses reverse, trapping cold air against the slopes and freezing moisture into black ice. Caltrans plows and salts the highway whenever the pass ices over, but closures can still back up traffic for 40 miles. Even on a bad day, more than 100,000 vehicles find their way through this area. Visibility can also vanish in seconds, resulting in multi-car pileups and stoppage for hours. Fires are not uncommon here as well, driven by the same dry winds that make the descent so unpredictable. To manage all that, Caltrans and the California Highway Patrol use weather sensors, wind monitors, cameras, and automated closure systems. Even with real-time data, Mother Nature calls the shots. Every storm, every fire season, and every fog bank is a reminder that this highway isn't simply built through the mountains, it's built at the mercy of them. Engineering and endurance. In spite of the Grapevine's challenges, it is a vital link to most of California, and each generation has added its own lanes, concrete, and drainage and improvements, attempting to keep this area in check. The latest Caltrans rehabilitation project replaced the pavement with high-strength concrete, reinforced the slopes, and upgraded quake protection. Technological advancements have helped now too. Message boards display live warnings, and cameras feed data to the CHP stations at Lebec. I think most people would agree that it's better maintained than it has been in several years, but the grade still tests vehicles and judgment. Let's just say it's not very forgiving of mistakes. It should be noted, though, that thousands of trucks clear the pass safely every day. A road that must endure. For more than a century, the Grapevine has tested everyone who's tried to cross it, from the first travelers who gave it its name to the wagons that rumbled over Tejon Pass. Every generation has faced the same steep and unforgiving terrain. When the first automobiles appeared, drivers wound their way along the narrow switchbacks of the Ridge route. Later came US 99 and the Golden State Highway, which widened the path and carried the trucks that built post-war California. But even that highway eventually gave way to something larger. The modern Interstate 5 cut straighter and deeper through the same canyons that challenged the pioneers before it. Each version of the Grapevine was built to solve a problem, yet the mountain still sets all the limits. Engineers have rebuilt slopes, reinforced bridges, and added technology that monitors the weather, wind, and pavement temperature in real time. Today's Interstate 5 through the Grapevine is among the most heavily engineered and closely monitored stretches of highway in California, and rightfully so. It remains a demanding piece of road no matter who you are, requiring some patience, preparation, and a good dose of respect. As an old driver once told me, you can get made fun of hundreds of times for going down a grade too slow, but you might not get a second chance to go down it fast. I think that sums up the Grapevine pretty well. We appreciate you watching our story on the Grapevine. It's nothing to mess with even today. Maybe you've got a tale that you'd like to tell. Well, if so, leave it in the comments below. We're very active there. Also, if you like this video, if you could, go ahead and click that like button. That helps it go a lot further on YouTube. That and sharing it with other friends that you think might enjoy it. You know, we love telling stories from the roads that move us. And if that's something you enjoy, hearing those kind of histories, then why don't you join us on this caravan by subscribing to the channel? Here at Beyond the Exit, we're always looking for history hiding in plain sight. And a lot of times it's just waiting there to be rediscovered. We want to thank you a lot for watching and being here, and God bless.